my fellow Americans. Tonight, I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak that started in China and is now spreading throughout the world. Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah, that was a good place to cut that off. Welcome to another episode of FFS Talk, if you're looking social media, websites, and whatnot. This is Dan Hugo, and I'm here to talk again and for all time about what works and what does not and what we can do about it. I guess elections do have consequences, so that's one thing, but avoiding the politics. What is going on with vaccination, pandemic, the world, perception, reality? So it's been 1 year. I'm actually recording this just after midnight on March 13th. So it's been a year. Well, how about this? We're starting the second year since the official declaration that COVID-19 and the virus that causes it, SARS-CoV-2, have attained pandemic status, as our former president was about to tell everyone in some detail. I will say that the title of this episode is a bit of an homage, maybe a sense of humor about plays on words, but the Human League, classic electronic song, Keep Feeling Fascination. Couldn't help myself. So, first of all, I will say that with all that has been going on for the past year about SARS-CoV-2, a coronavirus, we may have forgotten or lost sight of the common cold, which is also a coronavirus, which I believe I have either had a mild case of or I'm about to get worse. So the two take-homes from that are, one, I hope I'm getting over it. I've been getting all the NyQuil symptoms, sneezing, a little bit of coughing, congestion, tired. No fever, which has been good. None noticeable. You will hear my voice crack or worse. I am drinking tea with some Manuka honey in it, so pardon me. Delightful. But the second thing, being a coronavirus, there are two common cold variants of coronavirus that infect humans. And I do not remember the designations right now, but they are one of the reasons why words matter when you refer to the Rona, because coronavirus has already been in humans. And hey, what if, despite the general consensus that has existed up until recently, what if there's just no cure for the common cold? What if Granny was right? You drink her concoction and you drink plenty of liquids, 7 to 10 days, you'll be all good. So that was Beverly Hillbillies reference there. So anyway, I was watching. So the entire point of this show, this episode, and hopefully many others, is to take a look at things that work and that don't, and then what we might do about that. I don't want to complain. This is not a channel for just pointless rambling of complaints and angst. Although until I have guests, it may come across that way slightly. I prefer to think of this as planting seeds for topic arcs. So clearly, the global pandemic, with so many moving parts, is rife for discussion about those moving parts. Very clearly, some things did not work. So over time, people with some informed opinions, I'm not going to get Fauci on here, but it'd be interesting to have insightful discussion, and that's the plan about this topic or collection of topics and a variety of others. And so let us go down the path about pandemics, vaccinations, and what is going on. So I am vaccinated, by the way. I was fully vaccinated as of February 24th. I volunteered at a vaccination pod, point of dispensary or point of distribution. I've heard both. So I volunteered at a vaccination pod January, February, 5 times. Obviously, 2 of those were 28 days apart. I got a Moderna shot, so 28 days. I had no side effects to speak of, fatigue, mild headache, nothing really to write home about. So, I have on the ground anecdotal things to ponder and discuss, but mostly, I will say that I just watched it again. A really, really good presentation on a completely separate topic, or is it separate? About 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island nuclear generation facility. A great talk by Nickolas Means, who I believe is still at GitHub. The talk was from 3 or 4 years ago. I'll put a link to it in the notes. And he goes through, what happened. The the first pass of what happened. Here's what, as described by the people in the room, in the control room. Here's what we saw. Here's what we did. Here's when things went south. Here's why. And he ends up at a fascinating end, and it jibes with the entire point of the whole channel show, FFS, which is you can look at the story, the first story, when blame and finger pointing and angst and anger, depression, sadness, all the other fun times, all that's taking place. And then you peel that back and you say, okay, well, let's look at systemic failures. Let's look at what decisions people made on what bases that led to, how things unfolded. So he refers to a book that I literally just grabbed, ebook. I grabbed the ebook version. I just grabbed it yesterday. So on the 12th of March, it's called The Field Guide to Understanding Human Error by Sidney Dekker, Dekker. So Nickolas goes into what is called the second story, where in the case of 3 Mile Island, the Carter administration at the time commissioned a report. What happened and why? And the take-home, there were a lot of take-homes about systemic failures, about the way the control room interacted with the reactor, the training that the people in the control room had, their background, and how they did what they thought was right based on that, rather than a complete and correct representation of what was really happening. And then how a decision was made at this point that led to a cascading set of failures and whatnot. And you can do the same thing with Chernobyl. If you saw the HBO miniseries, and then if you hopefully went into the books, into the history, and you cross-referenced a couple of things. Some stories are obviously made for drama. So from what I understand, it was it was not awful, not 100%. If you did see Chernobyl, the end, I guess it was the final episode, the courtroom scene where they're kind of stepping through how the control rod movements led to a spike in reactor output and all that. So that's another discussion entirely. But anyway, I'm not a nuclear reactor anything. But the interesting thing is that a nuclear reactor is a complicated system that is moving in real time, and very large changes can take place very quickly. And if you misread the data, well, we've just got into two examples. The Fukushima is another interesting example, although there were some extenuating circumstances with the tsunami and the water and how the diesel generators may or may not have worked and all that. So didn't work. Anyway, so the points I'm making with this introductory rant is, it's not a rant, is a fascinating discussion, which I will link to, a book I hope will be as interesting about the second story, which is, without focusing on blame, finger pointing, what happened, what unfolded, what worked and what didn't, and how can we not have this happen again. I hope that's what the book is about, I assume, based on Nickolas's talk. So, where to jump into this, the year gone by. So I remember January 20th was the first time I mentioned on WeChat, hey, have you heard about this? I had seen it in our American press. I mentioned it. It was right around the time of what is typically the largest human migration on the planet. And when China put a stop to that in the interest of not spreading the virus, that maybe should have been a warning in January instead of March. But when you look at the series of events that have unfolded over the last, now with that reference, a year and 2 months-ish, surely there's going to be a lot to unpack. As some people, if you've been paying attention, you know that there was a so-called Spanish flu in around 1918. So that's, 102, 103 years ago? Or plus or minus 1 year, depending on when the flu started, where it started from, how it transmitted, by whom, to whom, the second waves, whether people wore masks, all these things from, 102, 3 years ago. All of these things are still the subject of certainly examination, some debate here and there. What really caused the flu to move to America? Was it soldiers returning from battle? Was it some other means? So that's 100 years ago, and clear answers are still not available. So it is likely, not certain, but it seems likely that the pandemic, I don't know if they have a real name for it, but COVID-19 global pandemic, or is it SARS-CoV-2? Either way. Certainly that will be a topic for research and examination for years to come. So this is just one toe in the water of a very large stream, river, ocean. So yeah, 14 months ago, 14 months ago, we had a new virus in town. Certainly, there have been Ebola and swine flu outbreaks in recent memory, and other I guess, well, nothing on pandemic scale like this, but certainly other viral scenarios have been unleashed, not the least of which are SARS-CoV-1, also known as SARS, and then MERS, and now SARS-CoV-2. These are 3 viruses. And I mentioned the 2 common colds, also coronaviruses. So that's a lot of coronavirus floating around inside humans. So not a complete surprise. However, the fact that there's no cure, or there wasn't, we'll see. There was no cure for the common cold, and certainly SARS and MERS were cause for concern, to say the least. I remember when SARS became known, travel advisories, whatnot. I was working at a company where we were owned by a company in Taiwan, and traveling to and from to conduct business. I didn't go. I was a lowly engineer in Silicon Valley at the time. But, there was concern about going to China, about going to Taiwan, either. So it was at least on the radar, but it went away. And just like that. So what happened when we first started seeing that news about this virus that's stopping a substantial percentage of the population of China from visiting their families as they do each year for the Lunar New Year, the Winter Festival. It's winter, not spring. What would cause that? And why would it be discounted so quickly out of hand? And of course, hindsight is, well, it's going to be what this show is about anyway, or about this whole entire show, and this episode in particular, as far as the pandemic is, how did, looking back now, what led our authority figures, our trusted, intelligentsia, and yeah, I'm talking about Dr. Fauci, but there's several other people, but he has become the face of the technical effort. So what happened that led to so quickly changing a narrative about what to do, what not to do, what to purchase in the way of masks, and what to wear in the way of masks, and what to avoid? And clearly there was not a complete understanding of fomite transmission, as in, should I touch the doorknob? Should I wash my hands? And sanitizer, and what sanitizers work, and how much alcohol. And so all of these questions that were asked and quickly answered and then re-answered has to be a source of concern. 14 months ago, there was not a lot of understanding. So the comprehension, you couldn't base it on data. You couldn't base it on, well, here's how many people have been infected by a doorknob, right? If I go to a grocery store and I touch something and I put it back on the shelf, am I transmitting it to the next person who grabs that item? And they touch their nose or whatever. So the problem, as I see it, and this is where having a guest or guests to talk about this will come in handy. The problem, as I see it, was there's no infrastructure in place to keep the narrative current as it develops. So I'm going to take a quick sip here. Hang on. Looking forward to that coronavirus cure making it to the common cold. So, or vaccination. So, in the face of changing data, changing observations, studies, data collection, analysis, the advent of the preprint paper, as authoritative source, which is tricky. All of those unleashed on an unsuspecting public that has become tuned and perhaps overly sensitive to what you could call the mainstream media game, where there's always the current story, and then the alternate media will play the mainstream media video clip from a month ago and show, the story has changed. So there's news feeds and timelines and YouTube channels and comedians reporting on news and conspiracy theorists pointing at news, maybe creating some of it and reporting on other parts of it. But we have the growth medium for misrepresentation, possibly, of assessment of what's happening at any given point in time. So very early on, when it became clear that Johns Hopkins was going to be at least one major outlet for a visualization, a map with graphs of what's happening at any given time, they happened to offer a not really a seminar, but it was a couple of hours that I went through. It's basically an introduction to epidemiology, not a class, not for credit, but a good rundown, which I valued as far as a sort of a nice primer on language, method. What are we going to be hearing? What are we going to be seeing? When people mention quarantine and isolation, are those the same thing? Specificity and selectivity. Now we have efficacy and efficiency. There's a lot of, the lexicon is worth being aware of. So that when we hear the news media or when we read a headline about a study says this, a study says that, we'll have some context, right? So that was my intention, and it was valuable for me. But I think the take home for me was when you hand over trust of what you are being told and how to assess it to your favorite cable news channel, your favorite podcaster, your favorite YouTube channel, whomever, or whomever's in your cadre of trusted news sources. But if they don't know what they're talking about, you're subject to things like, well, I heard, and fill in the blank. So when you have a Dr. Fauci early on suggesting not wearing masks, later saying you must wear masks, it's tricky when someone can play both clips and discount the entirety of his presentation based on his changing that story. This is generally, if you had a math teacher when you were a kid who told you 2 + 2 = 5, and then later said, all right, well, I only told you that so that you wouldn't go out and think it was a 4, right? So when the narrative changes and you don't explain why, you don't make it crystal clear why, you create a gap of credibility into which others may insert their own narrative with their own agenda. So the first thing that did not work in my own assessment is the lack of an educational mindset in the way the public was small I informed, definitely early on and throughout the entire year at least. So herd immunity, that's one that comes up frequently. I literally just read a quick article on the CDC website. I don't even know if I want to link to it. Probably not. They speak in generalities of a large percentage or some substantial percentage, or they use generic relative terms to describe what herd immunity is. And you've had, again, Dr. Fauci, and I'm only mentioning his name because he had and has been elevated to even higher a position of authority. And I believe he's been politicized a little bit. Some of it is probably his own doing. So he has been a part of what I would say is a problem. I'm not calling into question his technical acumen. I'm sure he is very qualified. Maybe not so much public speaking and teaching an unsuspecting public what it means when he adjusts his estimation of a herd immunity, we'll call it susceptibility percentage or a recovered percentage, I guess. How is he sharing that information? And when it changes in his assessment, what does that really mean? So when I took that Johns Hopkins course, they very specifically, or selectively, no, they very specifically go into how herd immunity works. It's not very complicated, but it is essential to understand 1 minus 1 over R naught. What is R naught? How do we derive R naught? Does R naught change over time? Does it become just R, right, at any given time? So a lot was made of this early on, right? So, R naught value is approximately 2. Anything more than 1 is going to be a problem. Measles is something like 16. So it's the number of people likely to be infected if you are in a room of susceptible people. Okay, makes sense. Now let's stop telling people what herd immunity is and what it's based on, and let's just change that percentage. Let's take it from 60, 65 to 80 and cast doubt on short-term, quote, return to normal. But let's not explain why. Well, now you're going to open yourself up for conspiracy theories, counterpoints that, a couple months ago you said this, you said that. And then you have an incomplete narrative left to individual states in the United States or to communities, selective enforcement, a misperception of what the virus threat is, aligning it too closely with influenza. I've heard just in the past couple weeks. So again, this is March 13th. So February, March. I don't get the flu vaccination, so why would I get this? You see fuzzy math about fatality, case fatalities, population fatality percentage. It's only 0.01%. Why bother? Kind of thing. So here, the teaching moments were politicized, simplified, and without explanation, merely throwing new values, herd immunity percentages, test rates, how often should be tested. There was no really Fauci or a staff of a cadre of seasoned experts who know how to tell the story, who try to stay on the same page, and who tell the story with references so that at any given time there should be a completely transparent record of what was said in March 2020, what was said in April, May, June, so that at any given time, if someone says, hey, something changed, you're not left to searching on YouTube for clips, maybe selectively cherry-picked to illustrate some conspiracy theory or agenda or disagreement. It doesn't have to be as extreme as a, quote, conspiracy theory. That's a loaded term on its own. But I think, my opinion, the lack of an existing teaching channel trusted information source, just like any teacher, you sort of have to trust the teacher. The teacher is telling you things, for better or worse, especially when it comes to history. Teacher may or may not be giving a complete representation, but you're going to form an opinion based on the curriculum that you have in front of you. In this case, I believe the curriculum was never really nailed down. A lot of political messaging, and that's going on today. A lot of credit claims and finger pointing still. End of the day, though, for something like this, and this was also true for, you could pick anything. Banking, the mortgage crisis, I guess you could say. The bank crisis of 2008. The Ebola outbreak, which was after that. Any crisis, the Katrina hurricane, floods, Louisiana, Texas, any time of fires in California, there are these real crises on the ground. The more people that are affected, the more likely there will be perception and reality. And the further reality is always a existential consideration. But let us assume that there can be some sort of acceptable, agreeable reality. But if you are on the ground and you've seen, if you're a nurse or a doctor or a frontline medical, ambulance, EMT, fire, and you're seeing your view of what's happening, my hospital's empty. I have an ICU full of people that are dying and laying in the hallway because we have no place to put the bodies. A full spectrum of reactions. Without any context, those stories start to become like plane crashes. You hear about one plane crash and suddenly flying is not safe. Without the context of knowing that there are thousands of plane crashes that don't happen every day. Well, back when people used to fly. So without context and without that teaching channel, I believe we have been left with a credibility gap, certainly an information gap, and a quick run at keeping it interesting. So we have local news, for example, that reports on daily case counts. Now, I was too young to remember the Vietnam War. I was born very near the end of America's participation and involvement. But from historical references, the daily evening news had body counts, had video clips of tragedy, right? So the picture was being drawn on a daily basis about where things were headed, and it was based on just numbers. Now, again, I wasn't there, but the body count was a thing. And we're seeing that in the media today. I mentioned the Johns Hopkins visualization. If you look at the COVID map as of yesterday, I want to say 29 million cases in America. The next highest numbers are like 11 million in different countries. You can check that out yourself. But we're seeing these opaque numbers broken down by state, sometimes by county, sometimes by zip code. We're talking about a 6-foot distance, social distance, really a physical distance. Keep a 6-foot distance between you and someone near you. But we're only going to give you data for your state. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? So the availability of information that is not packaged for, I don't know if it's simplicity or to make a point, but knowing that my state of Nevada, where I live, has a particular case rate, the news reports on it every day that it's continuing to drop the case positivity rate. So they're reporting on it as though it's a sporting event. And I guess in the absence of professional sporting events, or at least curtailing. Maybe that's filling in some of that space, but when it becomes opaque numbers like scores, anyone who's a sports fan, when you see the score, that's useful. But if you merely know that your team won by 1 point over their arch rival, it's interesting to know, and you're probably happy. But when you watch the game and you see how that 1 point win took place, that's much more interesting. So the how and the why are, well, in this case, they're probably essential, not just the what. So without that trusted channel, I think we've run into a really serious problem. And this is something, it would be interesting to talk about this with just a science teacher, right? Anyone who's educating children of any age, young students, how would you teach a student so that at the beginning of the school year, remember those school years? At the beginning of the school year, that student may have no knowledge about a particular topic, like how plants work. And then at the end of that year, you've grown some plants, and you've learned about photosynthesis. You've learned about what chlorophyll is. You've learned about soil nutrients, water, sun. So you've learned how this system works. And at the end of that year, by layering different systems and descriptions of system interaction and observation, watching how things work, if you just showed the student, a plant at the end of the year and said, there it is, there would be no learning. There would be only a picture at the end, right? So there's no way to interpret that. So without teaching society about this problem, in my opinion, you end up with these gaps that are filled in with misinformation, disinformation. Half the stuff on Facebook is from I have said these awful comments to people. Like I always I ask Dr. Fauci questions about mortgages. So I asked the mortgage bankers on Facebook about virology. Right? I mean, why not? So Facebook expertise, misassignment of trust, the equalization, the leveling of a playing field of knowledge and expertise between characters you have no access to other than through controlled media, TV, radio, podcasts, whatever. And people on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, the awful Clubhouse. The list is always growing. Whenever I hear I heard without some sort of a reference, I'm always troubled by that. So some people, I include myself in that group, if you have the wherewithal, there is certainly useful information available. The JAMA Network, which is a medical channel, clinicians, research, different levels of expertise in different areas that have early on were discussing their on the ground experiences. What am I seeing in the hospital? What am I seeing in the lab? What am I reading in the research papers that are published by their colleagues in other places? You see a great YouTube channel that I watch weekly at this point. Conveniently, This Week in Virology. So you have professional, experienced, and people with expertise giving their time for the education of, in their case, they're leaning towards a skilled audience, people that are in the industry of virology and epidemiology and immunology. However, it is not, they don't limit it to that. They don't use overly technical terms. They don't avoid them, but that information is available, but it is left to the reader, so to speak. So those with the wherewithal, the desire, the intellectual curiosity, the need to know, it can be found. You can certainly read preprint papers. You can read about selectivity versus specificity. You can learn about what a RT-PCR test is. You can read about what mRNA is. You can read about quarantine versus isolation and why they're different. Right? You can't self-isolate if you've not been tested, but you can self-quarantine if you may have been exposed. Right? These are subtleties that when they are flattened out in media discussion, social media discussion, when very technical words with specific meanings are used interchangeably and incorrectly by lay people, spread through maybe a well-intentioned but ill-informed media, headlines, news articles, podcasts, whatever, you end up with different versions of a changing story, which becomes fuel for conspiracy theories or simple, regular old, and I'm not trying to discount, I like a good conspiracy theory. They're just theories. But when people are making life and death decisions about something as simple as wearing a mask, something as critical as, do I go visit my older relatives, family members, friends who may be at risk? Am I going to ultimately kill them? It's not funny. It's a real consideration that I believe in many cases was not made with the best information available. Ignorance is not an insult. It is a fixable problem. So ignorance is the first thing to tackle when it comes to something like this. And I believe that has been a source of, well, it's been part of the problem. So then, when you hear about vaccinations now, so let's assume that things are going to get better. Let's hope. We have our vaccines. We have 2 already. We have a 3rd from Johnson & Johnson coming online. Efficacy versus efficiency. Those will be words that are misused now. It's almost like the unit problem that was caused a crash on Mars many, many, many years ago. I think it was about, when was it? 2001? SI units versus imperial. No. What is it? Well, I'll just say metric versus American. How about that? So when you're comparing efficacy, which is determined from trials, and efficiency, which is measured from public use, from general population inoculation, which we are experiencing now with Pfizer and Moderna in America, and we will begin to experience with Johnson & Johnson. So I just saw an article yesterday. Pfizer efficiency in general population, now that there are tens of millions of people inoculated with Pfizer vaccine in America, 80%. That's from memory. I could try to find that paper, but bottom line, there will be an argument that I thought it was 96%. Maybe it was 94%. Now it's 80%. That changed. Without transparency, without showing the work, so to speak, not doing the work, showing, here's how we get that number. Efficiency, 80%. Efficacy, 90, say it was 95. What's the difference? What does that mean? Why did it change? That information should be presented as one slide, one soundbite. Here's what this number means. Here's why it's not the same as that other number. There should never be a time when someone can say, you changed that number and you didn't say why. And so this, I believe, is, again, we're just going back to the same difficulty is leaving a public uneducated about something that impacts each and every one of them, not only passively, as in things are happening to us, we're the people, but you, me, us. When we don't know and we hear, we don't understand, there's no comprehension, there's no understanding of what's happening, then we may, again, go transmit. We may be, may become part of the problem. So this is the gap to fill is the way information is shared with a general public, whether it's a health crisis like this, a financial crisis like the mortgage crisis of 2008, could be a geopolitical crisis, could be economics, it could be what does it really mean to have under and unemployment. So we live in an age where, well, to coin a phrase from, I believe it was Mark Twain, a lie travels around the world while the truth is putting its pants on. So social media becomes an outlet for occasionally good, raising attention, shining a light on bad things, bad people, things that need to be addressed, fixed, or at least understood. But that is also the same medium through which misunderstanding, possibly agenda-laden commentary, shaping and cherry-picking of a narrative. I don't have to wear a mask because Fauci said in March I didn't have to, no matter what he said after. So as a software engineer, change is the name of the game. There's an entire, multi-billion-dollar industry, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, various others, tools that track changes, because version 1 and today, they may be almost different. Well, what is it? The Theseus, the ship of Theseus? Is it even the same application anymore? So the same facts may be distant memories by the time the science, the data, analysis, enough numbers to actually make a difference in those assessments. So again, educating the public, getting the tools out there to analyze information. And by the way, handing over trust to charts and graphs. And this happened very early on with the Seattle model. They were using some variation of a SIR model, I think, which is the susceptible, infected, and recovered or removed model, right? So it's supposed to, you fall into one of those buckets. So at any given time, you are either susceptible or infected, or you are recovered or dead. During each day, you would see in the news, and I just mentioned it, how many people, how many cases, testing cases. So mathematical models are often based on random population samples. But if I am just some person reporting data, typing it into a spreadsheet and sending it off to, up the chain, oh, I forgot 1,000 test results from yesterday, I'll just stick them on today. But if you are using time-based analysis, your data sets spike, but it was really data from yesterday, or maybe it was a couple of days worth and you just put them all together in one day, that's a problem. Additionally, if people are only tested because they've been sent by a doctor because there's insufficient testing resources, and then suddenly there's testing for everybody, but nobody's going to get tested because I already got tested. Public education, understanding, transparency. So, not new things, not new ideas. However, they are, well, we have a government in America. Wherever you are listening to this, you may have a different experience. But certainly in America, we have a government that is geared towards press conferences or lack of, sound bites, speaking through media, professionals, the press secretary, the press office, maybe having a congressperson speak to a news channel, reporter, maybe take a question, maybe not. Ideally, if we look back at that 3 Mile Island scenario, and I believe Nickolas actually says this. I'm going to link to the presentation that I saw yesterday. Again, I think he's done about 3 times that I've seen, different variations. They're all basically the same, but there is the very obvious first story, but then thanks in that case, in part, maybe in whole, to the Carter administration actually saying, wait a minute, let's investigate what really happened here, and arriving at some systemic problems, you end up with a better version that more closely matches a fixable scenario or a collection of sub-scenarios where you can actually learn and improve. If we merely say the former president screwed it up, and we leave it at that, well, the next pandemic will not go so well. We will have learned very little. Not to pontificate here, but this is the crux of the learning moment from the pandemic. How do we, as a planet, understand what it means to, understand what is happening, understand a very technical topic in a way that a non-technical participant can make good decisions that don't cost, in some cases, everything. So this will be an ongoing topic, not only specifically for the pandemic, but in general. And again, I've said this up at the top. What is working, what isn't, and how do we change that? The pandemic has taught everybody a lot about things like working from home, learning from home, homeschooling, hybrid learning. We've all learned about what does not work for the 99% of the economy. I just saw yesterday, I saw a lot of stuff yesterday, it being a year. The names everybody knows are the ones who made out with plenty of money. The way food delivery has been screwing over small business people, for example, or the way small retailers were screwed over because large retailers that sell food were able to stay open and sell other. So there've been a whole collection of things, events, interpretations, variations between different cities, counties, and states in the United States, much less between countries and border policies. There's so many learning moments to reflect on. But now that we're in the throes of vaccination programs being expanded and eligibility net being cast wider by, what did the Biden said, May 1st? Certainly by July 4th, our Independence Day ID4 moment. Bill Pullman type speech maybe coming. ID4, thank you. So what if we have another outbreak? What's going to happen then? Exponential growth, opening businesses when there's still unvaccinated, susceptible people that have not been removed or recovered. Well, they might become infected. Are we going to see that spike again? Are we ever going to be able to travel to other countries from America? So these are the sorts of things that I hope to continue along this topic arc. Again, generally with regard to SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, variants of concern, vaccination, side effects, boosters, numbers, data, and then what happens next. What does it mean for recovery of economy? What does it mean for recovery of society? To be able to go out without a mask on or to interact with someone without a mask. If you wear a mask, what does that mean? Do we return to some modicum of civility? Anyway, there's going to be plenty to talk about. I think this topic is fascinating. It has tested a variety of things, a variety of facets of humanity, character, society, economy, obviously science, political. That's a whole nother, I don't even want to get into that. But I think it's a fascinating topic. I think it's food for thought on a lot of different variations on the theme. Again, we could have a very similar conversation about money. What does it mean? How do people understand? What is debt? All that, which I've already touched on the economeering topic, right? Everybody has money. You have to spend it. You should understand something about economy, how economies work, whether you subscribe to modern monetary theory or Keynesian or supply side, whatever. So here, whether you are just a normal person trying to get by or whether you are a world-renowned epidemiologist developing pandemic models, right? We all are in this together. And I know that sounds glib, a platitude perhaps, but it's true. So on that note, thank you so much for listening. I am looking forward to deploying an actual website and social media now that I've returned to the mic. I've actually been, I have a weekly show that I've been doing with my mom of all people. And before you chuckle to yourself or try to make some witty comment, my mom's been a podcaster for several years. So this was like, hey, we're all trying to avoid going outside. Might as well turn phone calls into discussions about whatever. Might as well record them, make a show. So Hugo Floss, which is, yes, a play on words of sorts, though inspired by an excellent YouTube channel called Mental Floss. I think they have a website too. So Mental Floss, Hugo Floss, check them both out. And then I will also be adding another show called Quaggling Sand, which will be more anything goes and not. This is FFS should be structured a little bit on topics. Quaggling Sand, quite the opposite. So on these notes and many others, I will leave it here. Thank you again. And I look forward to live streaming and inviting people to participate more, especially if you're a topic expert or if you just have something to say. And let us see where things go. In the meantime, try to stay safe. Please get vaccinated. If you are not in a specific risk group, the vaccination is better than the disease. So, statistically speaking. So please do that. I look forward to you hearing me long into the future. Don't get sick. Have a good one. Until next time.